And we're good to go. Thank you all for being here, guys. It is a great pleasure, as always, to see you all sharing your Saturday afternoon with us. I'm sure you had plenty to do, so it's a choice that we feel honored to receive your time. Today we'll be talking about a subject that is not so much discussed, Gothic parody, okay, or Gothic comedy, and we chose for the class this subtitle, The Tales of Horror and Humor, right? Today, Anna will be speaking more than I do, hopefully.
Yeah. No, we're going to share, to be honest, right? We enjoy teaching together. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. If you're new here, if you're seeing us for the first time, hello, I'm Ana Carolina Torquato. I'm a teacher and founder of A Book a Month. And we're very happy to welcome such lovely faces, such lovely people today. And we're happy to talk about the subject, which is something that we have been researching together for the past year, right? So I am a PhD in literature. I work a lot with comparative literature and also very much with literatures in English, right? This is my specialty. And I have also done a postdoc in literature in 2022, and now I'm looking for another one. If you know of something, just let me know. And Áureo is also a teacher and PhD in literature. We have started working together in 2022. And he is doing his postdoc in literature at the time at the University of Padua in Italy. He is a wonderful addition to the team of A Book a Month. And he also, I don't know if you ever heard, he does have an amazing podcast called Literatura Viral. Yes. 100% of approval, as I see faces nodding. Everybody loves the podcast. We love it too. So it's a great honor to join the spaces of teaching literatures in English with Áureo. Yes. So we would like to introduce to you a little bit of what A Book a Month is for the people who are joining us for the first time. A Book a Month is a project which exists since 2020. So we are completing this year 4 years of existence. And it's a reading project, which is a method to practice and improve the English language, right? But also we do it while learning and reading original classics of literature. Right? This is a method which we take a lot of pride in doing, and we achieve all of that by reading 100% the original text in English, and also having classes and teaching in English as well. Yes. At the same time, you'll be engaging with the authentic text. We only work with originals. We don't work with adaptations. Therefore, you have the option to get to know your favorite author in the original language, right? So this is some of the things that we take pride in and that we aim to construct with you. Yes. So Áureo, I'm heading back to you, and then we'll continue later. Thank you.
Thank you. So guys, hello everybody, and pleasure to meet you for those that I haven't seen so far. This open class is actually connected to many of our courses. Nearly all of our courses this semester are touching on the Gothic, right? So the Novels Advanced course is a good example. We have just finished discussing Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, and now we are about to start Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. That applies to nearly all of them, like in the short stories course, in which we have read Edgar Allan Poe, and soon we'll be reading many other authors that are somehow related to this genre, right? So there will be a bit of marketing today, I'm afraid, okay? For those that are seeing this for the second, third, or for, I don't know, like 11th time, sorry about that. Unfortunately, we have to pay bills. So there will be a little bit of marketing, but we'll try to keep it just a little bit, not too much, okay? For a start, we have to define and to discuss what exactly is the Gothic. We have taught another open class last month talking about this and telling about the story of the genre and how it developed, what are its main characteristics. And so we discuss it in a lot of detail we have discussed in a lot of detail in that class a month ago. And that class was uploaded in YouTube. So if you want to check it out, later, you can just watch it in our YouTube channel. But very briefly, what exactly is the Gothic? The Gothic is a genre of literature and art in general. So it's not only literature, it started in literature, but then it migrated to cinema, to, many other, even music, if you wish. There are many different branches of the arts that will somehow be related to the Gothic. And the Gothic is trying to explore the aesthetics of fear. So it's not necessarily trying to make you fearful, like make you afraid of something. It's not necessarily trying to cause terror. It could do that, as terror movies often do. But it could be only exploring like this more melancholic feel of, of like this dark woods during the moonlight, so the fog, so things that are not necessarily scary, but are somehow connected to this aesthetics of fear, okay? And in Gothic fiction, when we're talking specifically about literature, there are at least 4 or 5 characteristics that you always find, and that really are used to define what a Gothic story is. And one of the most important is the threat of the monstrous, so in order for you to be afraid and to fall deep into this aesthetics of fear, there must be some kind of a threat. And usually this threat, this menace, is reaching you via a monster of some kind, so it could be Frankenstein, it could be a vampire, a werewolf, ghosts, but it could also be a metaphorical monster. It could be a serial killer, or perhaps nothing, just your imagination, so there are many possibilities in here, okay? But the threat of the monsters is definitely one of the key characteristics of the Gothic. So it is a horrific location, right? So you must be in a place that is not so comfortable, you must be out of your comfortable zone. Better if it's old and ruinous, definitely, but it could also be, I don't know, a hospital, a madhouse, an abandoned asylum. There are many possibilities, but usually they are somehow connected with terrible events, things that went very badly, tragic events. So some kind of place that by itself is already scary, so you have a scary place plus the menace of some type of monster. And also there are many intrusions from the past, so the past is somehow threatening us too, sometimes it does this via the place itself, like in this case, a Gothic cathedral, or an old abbey, or a cemetery. So anything that is medieval in kind is often used in Gothic fiction. But those intrusions from the past, they can also be connected to humans. It could be a hidden secret. For example, maybe your best friend in the narrative is a killer and you didn't know. Or maybe there is a double identity, like the good and the bad version of yourself, as we find in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, for example. So there are many possibilities in here. Often secrets appear, you realize, I don't know, like family secrets. Some people that were supposed to be dead are actually alive. There are vengeances, you know, like people like planning revenge against you and coming out for you. So there are many different possibilities here too that are connected with hidden identities and revelations that come to the fore. And finally, a fifth characteristic is definitely the relationship or the exploration of the macabre and also the grotesque, you know. So sometimes some writers will explore this with a lighter hand. Sometimes they'll do this with a very heavy hand, you know. If you guys like Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm sure many of you love Poe, you know, some of his short stories are pretty grotesque. You can find everything from incest to suicide and murder to live burial, live immerment. So all possibilities, you know, decapitation, everything you wish you will find there. Sometimes it's quite grotesque, but the whole idea is precisely explore exaggeration to cause fear, but also to discuss death, melancholia, all those themes that are connected to this aesthetics of fear. Finally, one characteristic that is often explored too is what we call the reality effect. So often the Gothic stories pretend to be true, you know, they pretend to be real stories that are being brought to you as if they were a journalistic investigation rather than being entirely fictional, you know. So many narratives play this card. This was real, just like the Blair Witch Project, this movie that pretended to be a documentary. This movie was very impactful when it was released in the 90s. And because it played so well, this card of the reality effect, pretending that story was real, and so it was very impactful. And the very same thing happens in so many fictional narratives. Sometimes this effect is implied. For example, in Frankenstein, where lots of the narrative is stowed via letters, so, or newspaper clips, you know, like, so those news that are assembled together, they give you the impression that is true. You know, the same thing is used in Dracula. Dracula also, it's like cuts and pieces from diaries and newspapers, and, you know, so they're trying to create this idea of documentation of a reality effect, basically. Okay. Anna, please.
Very good, yes. And in the last class that we introduced you to the origins of the Gothic fiction, we talked very much about one novel in specific, which is The Castle of Otranto, and one writer, Horace Walpole, the author of said text, mostly to illustrate what would it be like the textbook of Gothic fiction, which is the book that contains all the characteristics that Gothic fiction usually presents, right? And in this class, we want to introduce to you another text, which is even more famous and even more interesting in terms of analyzing which characteristics can we see which belong and actually have structure the Gothic as we know nowadays, right? So if you have ever heard about this lady here, which we have not much account of, not much biographical account, Anne Radcliffe, she is the author of The Mysteries of Udolpho, and she lived between the second half of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th. She was a very important novelist and also one of the pioneers of Gothic fiction, right? So she has created like a huge success with her novels, and she has conquered a space and credibility and respectability because of what she was publishing. And she was definitely one of the most influential writers in her time, as she published So I think she published more or less like 5 novels throughout her whole life, but there are a few which have conquered more attention of the public, and one of which is The Mysteries of Udolpho, which was published in 1794, and it was her absolute success, right? It's a very lengthy novel, which is something that usually comes with the Gothic. All the Gothic novels, they are very, very long, right? They are like 600 pages, 700 pages. And for this one, it's no different, right? And it is a very interesting story because it contains several of the characteristics that Áureo was presenting to you in the previous slides. Next one, please, Áureo. Some of the things that I also think it's interesting for you to understand and also to make a comparison with what it is to publish in the 18th century and what it is to earn money with literature at the moment in contemporary times. She was considered an 18th century bestseller, right? She used to sell books like what we consider like a bestseller nowadays. And she was paid high amounts of money, right, for that, which is something that is also, I don't know if it's unprecedented towards women writers, but at least she has accomplished a lot with the publication of the stories, and she was highly recognized by that. Even money-wise, she was rewarded, right? So with the publication of The Mysteries of Udolpho, she earned £500, and with the publication of The Italian, she earned £800. Yes, Áureo did the conversion. Áureo, what was the numbers? It was like a huge sum of money.
Yeah, I was checking out before the class, like how much money £800 were in 1794, right? And so considering inflation and everything today, it would be about of £124,000. So maybe 700,000 reais or something like that, maybe 800,000. So both of them together is about $1.5 million reais, or maybe even 2 million, something like that. So yeah, and this, it's important to remark that this was just the price the editor paid for the manuscript, but then she would be also earning from the selling of the books, right?
Yeah.
She got also a percentage out of that. So yeah.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, Jane Austen, who was a bit younger than Anne Radcliffe, and you all know her, right? She got £10 for the publication of her stories, right? So
Yeah,
just for you to have a
£10.
comparison, right? To
Which
see
is about 8,000 reais. Yeah,
8,000 reais. It is money, and it was money at the time, but it's not the same kind of money, right? So just for you to understand how popular she was, and how much money did she get from that as well. Yes. In the first publications, she published anonymously, and then later on, she managed to publish with her names in her name in the cover. Next one, please. So also something that I think it's very it's important to mention concerning Anne Radcliffe as a author, but not only an author of fiction, but also of non-fiction, and at some point also an essays on the topic of horror, terror, and Gothic fiction, right? She wrote several essays which they were published posthumously, and this is one of them in which she talks a little bit more specifically of her understanding of the difference between terror and horror, right? And I'm emphasizing her understanding because, of course, the critics, they have changed this perception and definition of the difference between these two kind of aesthetics into contemporary times. But on the supernatural in poetry, this essay that she published, she talks about terror and horror as being far opposite styles of writing and of perceiving fiction in or telling stories. For her, the first one, terror, it expands the soul and awakens the faculties to a high degree of life. In other words, she's saying that terror, which is something always on the brink of becoming dangerous to you, it creates an expansion in your perception and imagination, right? It gives thread to the imagination, whereas the other contracts, freezes, and nearly annihilates them, right? So horror, in her opinion, it freezes the public of fear. And by saying horror, she means something that is too full of the characteristics that we now love in Edgar Allan Poe, for instance. All the grotesque, all the sometimes this super violence, right, that we identify in him. And of course, some of her stories, they flirt with this kind of idea, but in one way or another, she presents it in a different way, and then she establishes her own side of her story of Gothic as terror. Next one, please.
So I just would like to add an example. So if you are in your house and you listen to a noise and you think there might be a ghost in the next room, that would be terror. You would just, and then you go there and there's nothing. It was just your imagination. So this is terror as she is defining it. But if you go there and there is actually a ghost, I don't know, like suing someone alive, therefore that would be horror, you know?
That
So
is horror.
if you imagine you are pursued by a killer, that's the terror, but it's just imagination. It's not actually happening. So it's interesting because Radcliffe is opposing actually the exploration that Edgar Allan Poe will do, for example, later on. You know, this very horrid stories, very gruesome, lots of blood, things like that. She's very much appalled, you know, taken aback by violence. So in her stories, mostly you get the threat of the Gothic, but it's mostly in the imagination, and then it turns out everything turns out well, and it's not what it seems, you know.
Yeah, there's always like a reasonable explanation to what was concerning what was on the verge of being supernatural, right? And something else that I think it's very common in the Gothic, in all kinds of shapes, also in Edgar Allan Poe, is the idea of having some stories which are set abroad, right? The Mysteries of Udolpho, for instance, would be set in both foreign countries, France and Italy. And this is a tradition mostly to focus, and also it's set back in time, right? It's not in the present time in which she is writing. She sets back in the past, right? And usually you have this idea of this young damsel in peril, right? This young, beautiful lady which is always being persecuted by someone. And usually the villains, they are of aristocratic and foreign descent, because the foreigners at the time, they were also like of this idea of the unknown, which is dangerous. Therefore, sometimes it would be considered as like more criminal or more perilous in some ways, right? In this sense, the imprisonment and persecution of the leading lady, it's also something that is well addressed in the story, and it's presented as always she is in danger, always someone wants to chase her in some ways. Yes. Something else that is also that it's relevant to the Mysteries of Udolpho, and it also appears in other Gothic fiction and examples, is the idea of the Gothic landscape, right? The Gothic landscape, it's something that appears in different kinds of measures. I think it's the other one now. In different kinds of measures in the stories, but in and Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho, it is exposed extensively and even extenuously, to the point that there is a merge with the idea of the terror and the Gothic landscape, as if the landscape would be able to harm the characters in some way, right? So this is a picture, for instance, of the Italian Pyrenees, And there is a wide description in the story, which is like it details even like this particular kind of sinuous path in which the characters go, and they are always in danger of some kind. Also, in the next one, you will see some pictures of what are suggested of the ruins and Gothic architecture, which is something that the Gothic fiction flirts a lot and talks a lot about. We discussed this more in depth in the other class, The Origins of the Gothic. And it shows a lot about this idea of how the space, the physical geography, and also the physical architecture, it's something that influences what's going on in the narrative, right? So as Áureo was saying, there is always the suggestion of the supernatural, and only like the last minute she's going to twist it up and then present the reality of the story as something that it could be reasonably explained, and it's not supernatural, but therefore something else that was happening and we can understand with reason, right? And this is a technique that she is a master for, mostly because she never explains what is really happening in the following pages subsequently to the action. She leaves it to the last moment, and then it becomes a page turner, right? You're always like, you cannot stop reading it, right? The text is very interesting to read, and you want to see what happens with the characters. And the end, but not the least, right? There's always romance. There's got to be romance in this kind of stories, because this is what creates the aura for young heroines like Catherine Morland herself from Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey feel the need to read the stories, right? They want to need the stories. They want to be the damsels in distress. They want to be persecuted, but also they want to be saved by the person that they love, by someone who is promising them with marriage or something. Yes. Next one, please, out. And at the end, also something that is very important and present in the story is something that, to be honest, I've only seen in this book by her in particular, right? She always introduces all the text, all the chapters with some kind of epigraph, some kind of epigraphy, right? Some kind of epigraph, including poetry, including quotes from Shakespeare, because of course, the first person to tell the biggest author of the English language to tell a ghost story was Shakespeare with Hamlet. So she always uses of this text in order to introduce what she wants to say in her text. For these reasons, we have several beautiful lines that she chooses very carefully in order to create this effect in the writer, in the reader, and create this anticipation with what is happening in the story. Yes. And in the semester, what you see in this image, we have already read, or we will still read, right? So we have been reading lots of Gothic stories at the moment. We have read, for instance, Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, and we have read several stories by Edgar Allan Poe in the short stories, but we will still read some other stories by other Gothic writers like Mary Shelley. We're reading The Mortal Immortal in the short stories in April, I think. And we'll read The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, the beautiful narrative poem, and also The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, right? Of course, Wuthering Heights, it's a story that we never fail to mention because it's one of the textbooks of Gothic fiction, one of the most acclaimed and beloved novels of the genre, right? Something that has created even more attention than Anne Radcliffe has created herself.
And then one important thing to add is that when Mysteries of Udolpho was published in 1794. So we are at the very the very end of the 18th century, right? And so throughout the 19th century, all the great classics of Gothic fiction that we remember, many of us know Anne Radcliffe, but I think she's much less known than Poe or Mary Shelley, for example, which was not the case at the time, you know? So this is very interesting because, you know, the distance in time gives us a completely different configuration of how literature, how we see literature from our standpoint and how they saw literature while it was happening. You know, they would consider Anne Radcliffe much more not only known, but even more important, let's say, than Mary Shelley or Edgar Allan Poe, for example. Then we changed that. Time tells. But it's interesting that throughout the 19th century, so many of the classics of the genre will come out, and not only these, but also Dracula or Jane Eyre or so many others, you know, Frankenstein and so on.
Frankenstein. Yes.
And yes, Anna?
No, nothing. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And so one thing that will also start immediately after her enormous success, we have this period in the end of the 18th century in which the Gothic is reaching its final form, and then it's going to be studying and very, you know, and changing little things and you know, variations of this Gothic form that we'll see in all these works and many others. So one of the things that will happen, one of the experiments that immediately people will try to achieve is combining it with other genres, right? So which genre I'm thinking of here, right? This is a big Gothic classic, but we could also argue it is a sci-fi classic. You know, Frankenstein is mixing both things, science fiction and Gothic fiction, you know? It's not, the Frankenstein is not really happening in the Middle Ages. You know, and it's not really, Frankenstein is not put up, you know, together in bits and pieces with magic or necromancy or something like that. No, it is actual science, electricity, and so on. And so it is something that is contemporary and technological and scientific, and therefore points towards science fiction. But at the same time, it is Gothic, you know, so it's already a mixing of genres. A similar thing is happening in this narrative here. This may be a bit more difficult to spot. Holmes, can I pet that dog? You know, if you guys have seen that adorable movie of the girl trying to, she sees a bear and she wants to pet the bear, and she tells her mom, can I pet that dog? And so
yes, very southern Gothic kind of accent, right? Can I pet that dog? Can I pet that dog?
Yeah, it's quite
very
cute.
funny.
Huh? So we're talking about the Hound of the Baskervilles, right? So which is one of the early mysteries that is solved by Sherlock Holmes, and throughout 80% of the story, it looks as if there was something ghostly going on. You know, it seems there is a hound is a dog, a very big dog that is used for hunting, right? So there is this hound that apparently is attacking people in something like satanic or monstrous in some way. And then Holmes comes to investigate, and it seems for a large chunk of the story that it's actual something supernatural, but then it turns out it's not, and Holmes solves the crime, right? So in there we have a mixture of Gothic with detective fiction, right? So what I want to show to you with those two examples are precisely the ability of the genre to adapt and to mix with other things. And that's important after all, because now we can start discussing what's the main issue at this class. We're here to talk about Gothic comedy, you know, humor. And so now that we have defined the Gothic, now that we have discussed a few of its classics, especially Anne Radcliffe, and now that we have given you two examples of how the Gothic is able to dialogue with other genres, we can get into the Gothic comedy, and which is a genre that we don't discuss a lot, you know, not so much in literature, maybe more in cinema, but in literature not so much. And one of the early masterpieces of Gothic comedy, or let's call it Gothic satire, is penned by Jane Austen. Austen, who was touched by the finger of God, we all know. She wrote 6 novels, and all of them are absolutely incredible. And please give yourself a gift and read them, because they're amazing. And she was younger than Anne Radcliffe, but they were contemporaries, you know. And Austen was very interested in irony and sarcasm. She's pretty much England's Machado de Assis, if you want to take the comparison. You know, she's super funny, very witty. Wit is when you can answer very fast to what people tell you, and in a funny way, you know. So all of us, we have friends that are like that, you know, that have the perfect word, the perfect sentence at the perfect time, and it's super funny. This is called wit in English. I think we don't really have an equivalent in Portuguese. So she was very witty, and her novels show us this. Sometimes, you know, you read it when you're young, you don't even realize that there are jokes that are being told, and then you read it again a few years later, and then you realize it, and it's super funny. So sometimes it's not so easy, however, to understand the jokes, because we don't know what she's making fun of. And this is the case certainly with Northanger Abbey, because Northanger Abbey satirizes Gothic novels, and especially Anne Radcliffe, you know. So Anne Radcliffe was the big author of the day. Everybody had read her. Everybody knew what the Castle of Udolpho, the Mysteries of Udolpho, was about. And so when Jane Austen sits down to write a parody, you know, a satirical comment upon Anne Radcliffe, everybody would understand the joke. But you know, after 200 years, for us, the joke is, we miss the joke a little bit, and then we need literature class in a Saturday afternoon to get that. So the important thing about Northanger Abbey, it is that it was the first novel that Austen finished. So she had written a few things. She wrote this in 1798 and 99, so 5 years after the publication of The Mysteries of Udolpho. She read the book, she writes this satire, and she wrote for her family, actually. So she read for the entire family, they loved it. Later on, a few years later, she sold actually the manuscript to a bookseller in London, so to a publishing house, right? And she sold it for £10, as Anna mentioned before. So we can see the difference between what she was getting and what Anne Radcliffe was getting. This was 1803. And then something very peculiar happens, because the publishing house bought the rights to publish the book. They did the marketing and the advertisement, but they never released the book. They never gave Jane Austen any explanation. They simply said to everybody, okay, big release, this new book is coming out, and it never came. And so Jane Austen was very bothered by this. This was her first book, after all. She would only years later publish then Sense and Sensibility, and then Pride and Prejudice, and then all the others. And so this book, which is her first book, would remain unpublished and was published only posthumously. She bought the rights back in 1816, so 13 years afterwards. She decided she would publish the book. So she bought back the rights of publication from the same company that was called Crosby and Co. And then she was planning to publish the novel in 1817, but she died before she could achieve that. So the novel was published in December of 1817, but it was published by her brother a few months after her death. She died pretty young, 40-something, and she had very small success, a moderate amount of success during her life, just enough for her to live by what she earned from her books, mostly Pride and Prejudice, but nothing coming even close to what Anne Radcliffe was. Anne Radcliffe became a millionaire. She stopped working. She traveled around.
She retired her husband, right?
She retired and retired
yeah,
her husband too.
Yes. But I would like just to say something out. I think that we often wonder why such great author hadn't received the same success that she enjoys nowadays, right? And I think that one of the reasons is actually the satire, which was directly aimed at the society of her contemporaries, right? Because if you've read other stories by her, for instance, Pride and Prejudice, she begins as satire, right? It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife, right? It is universally acknowledged, right? So she's teasing the society in which she lives. Therefore, it might have irritated some, right? So nowadays we perceive it with much more value, but of course, you would have to look back in time to understand what was the reception of her novels in order to get why hasn't she gotten some more prestige for her publications, which are amazing, right? So
yeah, definitely. And actually there is a lot of discussion among literary critics of why this novel was not published, because it's very weird for a publishing house to do this, to even do the marketing. It costs money. Why would they do it if they are not going to release the book? So something happened there. We don't know what happened, but one hypothesis, and it's a pretty good one, sincerely, is that they didn't publish precisely because she was making fun of Anne Radcliffe, because long and behold, Crosby and Co. is the very same publishing house of The Mystery of Udolpho. Okay, so maybe they just bought they read the book, they knew it was making fun of Anne Radcliffe, maybe they even thought it was good, but they decided, well, let's buy the rights and pretend we're going to publish it. So because The Mysteries of Udolpho was the it was the 50 Shades of Grey of its day, let's say. It was a big success. The Da Vinci Code, whatever you want.
less exposure, right?
What?
Less exposure, less sex, right? So
yeah, so maybe it was a market, a market strategy to protect their earnings. It could be. It's one hypothesis. It is discussed, and well, anyway, just so that we'll let you know it. So the satire could be the problem too, and we can see how much fun she's making of Gothic fiction straight away. This is the very first paragraph, the very first sentence. Anna, can you please read it for me?
sure. No one who had ever seen Catherine Morland in her infancy would have supposed her born to be a heroine. She liked books at age 14, provided that nothing like useful knowledge could be gained from them, provided they were all story and no reflection.
Yeah, so she loves to read, as long as there's nothing interesting in the books, right? So if you don't have to think, oh, then this is the book for me, So obviously she's already making fun in the very first page. But then things would change a little bit, because now she is a few years older, and so she's maturing. Please, Anna.
But from 15 to 17, she was in training for a heroine. She read all such works as heroines must read to supply their memories with those quotations which are so serviceable and so soothing in the vicissitudes of their eventful lives.
Yeah, we can see Austen's vocabulary here, right? Serviceable. For us, it's not so difficult, right? We can understand it's connected to service somehow, so it's useful, right? For a native English audience, it's a tougher word to decode. Soothing means calming. Vicissitudes means, I don't know, something bad, when some events, but especially bad events, when they happen, those are vicissitudes. So she's reading Gothic fiction exclusively, a little bit like Don Quixote, that only reads stories of knights, you know, and adventures, and goes mad. Our heroine here is reading only Gothic novels and is taking this to be her training for the challenges of life. And so this is going to be the key element in the novel, because there's nothing less, you know, there's nothing more that looks less as real life as a Gothic novel. You know, everything. I've never seen anybody being buried alive. I hope I never do. I don't think you guys ever saw that. If you did, please phone the police right now, you know? So it's not something that is happening every single day, like you get the impression of when you read Edgar Allan Poe. But the cool thing is that Catherine, she's not really capable of making the distinction, you know? So when she reads The Mysteries of Udolpho, she's super young, very naive. And so she accepts the story as she believes in the reality effect. She accepts that is truth, that there is truth into it to some level, and that she can use the knowledge she acquired in the Mysteries of Udolpho to judge real life, you know? So she starts to see murderers all around, and she misjudges people the entire time. So people that that are super nice, she thinks are bad, and people that are bad, she thinks are super nice. So it's very interesting, because she finds herself into a lot of trouble precisely for taking Gothic fiction too seriously. You know, so it's a way of satirizing and making fun of the way in which the genre is organized. You know. This novel, however, also offers us a reflection about the role of literature in society. You know, it's very clear that she is maturing. She's very naive at the beginning, and then she's, you know, getting herself into trouble, and then learning with her mistakes, and then eventually realizing that the Gothic fiction, you know, it's just fiction, and it's quite different from the skill set that you need to navigate the real world. So it is a coming of age story, a story in which we follow the growing up, the intellectual, psychological, even physical growing up of a character, right? But at the same time, it's very nice in the profound way that she relates to literature. I think it's true for many of us that love reading. When you see that at one point, when she's like halfway through The Mysteries of Udolpho, she says this: I should like to spend my whole life in reading it, you know? So she's wishing that the book would never end. And I'm sure that this is a feeling that we've all got at some point, you know, that book that when you're getting to the end, you're like, oh my God, it's almost finishing, you know, like I wish there was a second volume or something. So, and another very interesting thing about this novel is that Northanger Abbey is defending novels from attack, because at her day and age, novels were considered something for ladies and children. You know, it was considered less valuable, and that real adults and real intellectuals should not engage with novels. And we see this even in Jane Austen's works, when, for example, in Pride and Prejudice, there is one of the characters, a guy that brags that he never reads novels. That's for girls. I don't read novels at all. I only read sermons, you know. And
Mr. Collins.
Mr. Collins, yeah, exactly. And so no wonder that he's super boring. He's the most annoying and boring guy ever. And obviously he is there precisely to make fun of people that at the time would proclaim such things. So it's interesting that Northanger Abbey is a defense of the novel as a genre of prestige, you know, and as the entirety of Austen's oeuvre. We see a very interesting female character, you know. She's very different from what was done at her time, because her characters are not only women, which is already not so common, but they are profound women. They are strong women. They have a very rich inner life, and that's often not the case when you compare her novels with the contemporaries, you know. And this is even true of Anne Radcliffe, you know,
Yes, of course.
the characters are very shallow. They have a name and a few characteristics, and that's it. You don't get anything profound, contradictions, paradoxes, right? No change. They start in one way, they finish the same way. That's it.
Mhm.
So they lack profoundness and deepness. Would you like to add anything, Anna?
No, I think that maybe that also novels, they were mostly considered to be like girls kind of literature, right? Because the real literature were for that were for boys and men. It was poetry, right? Since
Yes.
the most like privileged kind of
Homer.
literature would be Homer, the great poets, right? So writing novels, it was something that was more considered to be like lesser in comparison to poetry, therefore mostly associated with women as writers, but also with women as readers, right? Because women at the time, they could be perceived as frivolous and all the things that you already know, right? So by doing that, she's actually making her point as herself as an author, but also the right of literature for women as well.
Yeah, and yeah, using the genre to make fun of it, right? Um, um, however, what she's doing really is showing us one character that took Gothic too seriously. But Jane Austen is not really writing a Gothic novel. She's writing a satire of a Gothic novel, you know, which is quite different. We can talk later on of Gothic parody rather than Gothic satire. Gothic parody, because a parody will imitate something to make fun of it, right? When you listen to a parody, a song, for example, it is the same song basically, but you change the lyrics to make it funny and to be disrespectful in a certain way, you know, to poke fun at something or someone. So later on in the century, this genre of Gothic parody will gain momentum. You know, it's gonna grow. And one of my favorite works of that exercises this, that contains these characteristics, is Phantasmagoria by Lewis Carroll. It is his longest. It's a poem. Okay, his longest poem. It contains 7 cantos, so 7 chapters, and it's very humorous. It's funny, but it's funny not because he's making fun of Gothic directly, but more because it is a bit nonsensical, as nearly everything that he wrote, and also there is a bit of world building. So what we read about is there is this aristocrat that is smoking cigars in his library, and he realizes that there is a ghost, like near a chair by the books, and the ghost is afraid of him. And so I'm going to show you a piece now, and then so they start engaging because it's basically is a story of a ghost that is afraid of humans. So we get exactly what you would expect in a Gothic novel, but it's inversed, you know. And so this is the parody element. It's funny because a ghost should not be supposed to be afraid, and the guy should be, you know, the guy should be afraid. He's not, and so you get an inversion of roles, which is funny. You also see that in the poem he's also making fun of the idea that the Gothic is taking place in, you know, like the Middle Ages, the medieval cathedrals, things like that. And he makes fun of that by using old spelling, you know. So, for example, Canto 2 is entitled His 5 Rules, you know, and his 5 rules, that's it, you know. But he's writing with an Y rather than an I, just because in, you know, in Old English, usually the Y was more used. So it looks ancient, but it's not, you know. The same thing here. Rather than saying his food, he says his nourriture, you know, like nourriture is food in French. It was used in, you know, in Old English, in Middle English, sorry, like Shakespeare would use this word every now and then. So he's using it instead of food precisely to give us this idea that is something that is old and crumbling apart, you know. And the musicality and the meter, the rhyme are super interesting. They're very beautiful. I'm going to read a passage to you. This is the moment in which the ghost is by the chair. The guy is reading and smoking a cigar, so he has not realized that the ghost is there. He saw something with the corner of his eye, but he did not pay much attention. And then the ghost starts sneezing and coughing, okay, and so making noise. So he's sick, apparently. And so this is what the narrator will tell the ghost. But presently the thing began to shiver and to sneeze, on which I said, "Come, come, my men, that's a most inconsiderate plan. Less noise there, if you please." "I've caught a code," the thing replies, "out there upon the landing." I turned to look in some surprise, and there, before my very eyes, a little ghost was standing. He trembled when he caught my eye and got behind a chair. "How came you here?" I said, "and why? I never saw a thing so shy. Come out, don't shiver there." He said, I'd gladly tell you how, and also tell you why. But here he gave a little bow. You're in so bad a temper now, I'll think it all a lie. And as to being in a fright, allow me to remark that ghosts have just as good a right in every way to fear the light as men to fear the dark. So basically, the ghost is saying that if we fear the dark, it's okay for him to fear the light. Everything is inverted, right? Because he's a ghost. And so they're gonna start talking about the ghost world, and we're gonna learn that he's paid to do this job. His job is to frighten people, and so he's just like a normal person, but reversed and being a ghost rather than being alive. He's dead, and so on. And you can see that the rhymes are interesting. There is a certain musicality to it that is very, very nice, you know, and by itself is already mocking the very, you know, when you compare this to, once again, to Edgar Allan Poe, his poems are very serious, you know, and they sound very nice too, but they are serious. And in here, he's using the same techniques, but trying to achieve a complete different effect. And of course, you might have remembered this guy here, Casper, right? Gasparzinho, who is probably a remake of Phantasmagoria. You know, it's a ghost that is afraid of people. He's paid to scare them. He doesn't want to do that job, etc. So we can clearly see a connection here between a movie for kids and this Gothic parody that was also intended for kids at the time, but also adults. But anyway, kids would also be reading poetry a lot. Another very good example is this short story by Oscar Wilde, The Canterville Ghost.
Yeah, we read The Canterville Ghost in the short stories course, possibly I think in 2021 or 22, I'm not so sure. And it was one of the favorites among our students because it's a very humorous and satirical story, and it has a similar kind of theme as for what we see in Phantasmagoria, right? We have a story in which Áureo, could you jump to the next slide so I can tell the story and show the characters as well? So we do have this family who come from the US, right? Mr. and Mrs. Otis. And they have children, Washington, Virginia, and a couple of twins, right? And they are nouveau riche, and they come to the UK because they want to experience what it is actually to feel like being an aristocrat. And of course, in their understanding, and this is also where the satire begins, being an English aristocrat means also living in a haunted house or living in a haunted space, right? Therefore, this is what they do. And when they're first introduced to the house, they had to first evaluate if that house is haunted enough for them, and if they can find a good ghost to haunt them so they can also have fun and feel as if they are part of it. As this line here introduces, "My lord, I will take the furniture and the ghost at evaluation," right? And if they like the ghost, then they would stay. If not, it's also something that they would consider in order to take the house where they're renting or not, right? And a series of events starts to they start to happen in the story, The Ghost of Canterville, by Oscar Wilde, the author of The Picture of Dorian Gray, right? And he creates this whole idea of Gothic fiction, but not in a way to create mockery, as we saw, for instance, what Jane Austen is doing, but actually to use the frame of the genre in order to create a story in which we have a bit of fun with the aesthetics that we already know and we have already talked about today, right? Could you go back to the last one, please? The last slide. Yes. Okay, so what we see, for instance, is it's a series of practical jokes, because the ghost of the house, which is called Sir Simon of Canterville. Canterville is the name of the house that they are renting. He is, as the ghost that we see in Phantasmagoria, he's a bit scared of the people who are near him, right? So he doesn't achieve the only job that he has to do, which is actually to scare the guests, and he instead starts to be the object of like various pranks, various practical jokes. They are done by the twins, the two little kids, right, the two boys, and they start creating the several situations in which the ghost is going to be exposed for being afraid of other ghosts, for not being good at his job, and also for not being able to scare them, the twins, right? If you see in the image, this is called, it's a moment in which he falls from the stairs, because the twins who are here on top of the stairs, they are observing him. They have put like a little bit of butter for him to be able to slide and then take a fall. If you take a look at it, you don't really notice who is the living and who is the ghost. If I were to look at this image without noticing it, without knowing anything concerning the story of the Canterville ghost, I would assume that the children were the ghosts, not the ghost himself, right? And the idea of twins as ghosts and scary people, they have been further in the industry of cinema have been explored. There's something dangerous and scary, right? As for instance in The Shining with with Jack Nicholson, right? If you remember this image, you will remember as well. I think I'm hearing a sound. I'm not so sure where it comes from. Let me just take a look. All right, cool. All right. Let's go to the next one. And also something that I think that when we think about all the stories and what and how can we connect some ideas of scary situations and scary stories and satire, and how would it fit in the world of children's literatures? Because we're talking about Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and also in some extent, I think also the Canterville Ghost could be read and enjoyed by young adults as well. So we try to understand, like, where does this satire with the idea of humor and with the idea of Gothic took place, and what are the origins of that, right? And recently in the Novels Intermediate course, we have been talking a lot about the subject of the origins of children's literature, and specifically of Gothic fiction and satire. Áureo, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Jane Austen was satirizing the Gothic genre, but she never really engaged with it. But I find it very interesting that Oscar Wilde was making fun of the Gothic with the Canterville Ghost, and it was a big success. Everybody loved it at the time. When I read, I love it. So did Anna. When our students read it, they love it too. So it is a very great text. I highly encourage you to check it out. You can read like in an hour and a half maximum. You can find it audiobooks in YouTube, or it's very easy to find online. And it's interesting because although he's making a parody of the Gothic, he was a Gothic writer himself, right? He would publish 2 years later The Picture of Dorian Gray, right? So he has not even written the book yet. So it is a genre that he's practicing, you know? So it's very interesting because this is a parody, but it's not that he's wanting to really make fun to you know, show us scorn for the genre. You know, he does not despise the Gothic. And the proof of that is that he's going to write other things that also fit within the genre, and some of them are actually masterpieces of it, you know. But the Canterville Ghost has this flavor of a fairy tale, and the same thing could be said about Lewis Carroll. So it is interesting. We often modern day readers get surprised that that Gothic topics could be discussed within children's literature, you know, like all this macabre stuff and things connected to death. And so we often conceive of children's literature as something that is somehow purified and somehow protective of the world, and therefore it should not touch on certain themes. But this is very interesting because historically, this is incorrect. The fairy tales themselves were, you know, they look that they are like all peaceful and nice to us because we did not read the originals. When we read the originals, we get shocked, you know, because they are packed with horrible stuff, like really the most horrendous things. They are super shocking. However, it is us that we read different versions of the story. The originals, you know, the originals were not merry at all, actually. So maybe Anna, would you like to continue mentioning the green book?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about the idea of creating fairy tales in a scary way, right? When our perception, which is very contemporary, when we look back, and has very much been influenced by Disney, and when we take a look at the original text and what they have to say for themselves, we are shocked, as Áureo was saying, mostly because we don't expect to find these details in texts that nowadays we consider to be aimed at children, not a text that was a popular compendium, a popular anthology of tales which refer to traditions, cultural traditions, and cultural stories, right? One example of which is of Snow White, right? We know the story of Snow White. We know that she was the fairest of them all, and her stepmother, she was envious of her beauty. Therefore, she asked the huntsman to go after her, right? And then the rest, you know the story, how it ends, yes? But in the Grimm's version of it, which is the original, which all that we know of, we develop after this, is that in Snow White of the Grimm's version, her mother is the queen, not her stepmother. And her mother gets envious of Snow White and asks the huntsman to do so, like, take Snow White out into the woods, kill her, and as proof that she's dead, bring her lungs and her liver back to me, right? And what happens afterward is a little bit of hints of cannibalism. The cook had to boil them with salt, and the wicked woman ate them, supposing that she had eaten Snow White, right? We know that the story is, of course, the huntsman had sacrificed an animal and then created this whole illusion for the queen to desist, to give up pursuing Snow White and then saving her, right? But you see how difficult and how different it is from the Disney versions that we know nowadays, right? of course, if you were to transform the Grimm version into an animation, nobody would watch it, I think, right? At least not children. Perhaps we, as adults, we would watch and we would have like the same fun as we do while reading something by Edgar Allan Poe or reading something by Matthew Lewis, but it is some kind of different connection with the text, right? And this Disneyfication is something that by many authors, for instance, as Angela Carter, as Margaret Atwood, has been deemed to be a revision of what literature actually is, right? If you look and go back to the text and change them, therefore, you are rewriting something that has been constructed and has been part of the history of culture and literature. Yes, Angela Carter is an author, a British one, and she is famous for this same kind of characteristics that we presented to you today. But also she does something very specific and that I really enjoy, which is some kind of retelling of stories that we very much in love, that are very similar to the fairy tales, but they tell it in a way in which we see some presence of gore, some presence of Gothic fiction, of the macabre, and but also with some touches of feminism, right? Which is also some of the things that we see and value very much in her work, right? This kind of themes, to talk about something which could be a bit difficult sometimes, themes of sadness, sometimes themes of death, sometimes themes of loss. They have been erased from literature mostly with this kind of event of Disneyfication, as we mentioned to you before, as a way to cosmetize literature in order for them to be apprehended to children. If we compare what children are reading nowadays and what they used to read before, sometimes these texts, they are sometimes a bit shocking, but also they're talking about events which are embodied of sadness, but they're part of real life, right? For instance, we do have other authors which also do this kind of idea, which is, for instance, Lois Lowry, the author of The Giver, one of the stories that we're reading this semester, starting in March. And this one is a dystopia which is aimed at children, right? Usually dystopias like The Handmaid's Tale, like the Mad Adam trilogy, like 1984, Animal Farm, all of this, they are the target audience is adults. But why not introduce something that can be also benefited from children, and that they also can enjoy something that is more critical and that is more connected to reality itself. So I think that these two authors, they have plenty of characteristics and good qualities because of that as well. Yes, Áureo, please.
But the great thing about The Giver is that it's written in a very intelligent way. So when you start reading it, it's a lovely read, really. It won so many prizes. Louis Laurie is still alive. This is a contemporary novel. And the great thing about this book is that when you start to read, it looks like an utopia, you know, like the perfect world. Everything is amazing. And then as the story develops and the main character is a child, and his job is to be the memory of the people. So he's gonna learn basically he's a historian. He has to study the past and learn how history was before they reached this perfect society. And when he starts to learn about the history, he starts to wonder and to make questions, you know. So, and then you start little by little to realize that many things are not actually that perfect. So it's a very interesting novel, very, in a certain sense, very naive, you know. It causes a lot of scandal, but it's very sensible, very touching. It's a delightful way to introduce such arguments into discussion. It's not traumatizing at all. Very different from the cannibalism of
it's
the
a coming of age
Greek.
story, right? In which the character is going to learn and to be more critical to his own society.
Yeah. And well, we have one last part. We're going to finish on time, certainly. before we talk about the influence of the Gothic in the 20th century, just wanted to talk a little bit about our courses. So maybe you already know, but maybe you don't. We organize our courses in a book a month, depending on how much time our students have to read. So maybe your life is super busy, jobs and university and kids and so many things, and you have no time, you know. So one of our course, we have a course for students that have no time to read, which is reading class, in which it is taught by me, and in this course we read everything in class. So you just have to show up once a week for an hour and a half, and then we're going to read everything there and discuss and have fun and improve English and learn literature at the same time. Those are the great people we'll be studying. Lewis Carroll is the next one starting in March. You can see that a few of them are connected with the Gothic too. Alice Walker is a contemporary author. She's alive, the author of The Color Purple. We're going to read The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe later on. Even Virginia Woolf with modernist Gothic, a very interesting short story. Eventually we will read Emily Dickinson, play by Oscar Wilde at the end of the semester. So it will be super interesting. Then there is a course that is called Short Stories for people that can do some reading, that are willing and want to read maybe up to an hour a week. Texts that have to 4, 5, 10 pages maximum. And so this course is taught by Anna on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And then those are the authors that will be read from March onwards, starting with Angela Carter, 2 of the short stories that are present in the book Anna was talking about, The Bloody Chamber. One of them is called Wolf Alice, for example, which is like the evil version of Alice in Wonderland, kind of, and as if you flip the big bad wolf, you take that fairy tale and then flip it on its head, and then you get Wolf Alice. But we will also be reading Flannery O'Connor, Mary Shelley, Catherine Mansfield, so authors that are really heavyweights. They're really classic authors. Flannery O'Connor is one of my favorites. She and Alice Walker are known for participating in this school in the US that is called the Southern Gothic. So a very interesting literary movement. We'll also be reading authors that did not write in English. So 2 authors in translation. One is Japanese, Akutagawa, that is considered a great master of the short story. And also Primo Levi from Italy, who survived Auschwitz, and he's one of the great writers of Italian literature in the 20th century too. So and plus we'll be reading 2 contemporary writers, Susan Sontag, the philosopher, and Grace Paley, who is really super talented, has won so many prizes. Then there are courses for people that want to read 1 book a month, right? A book a month is the name of the school anyway. And those courses can, you know, there are 2 possibilities. Either the intermediate course, in which you have to read about 2 hours a week, maybe 30 pages more or less. This course is taught by Anna, and the students will be discussing coming of age stories. So starting with The Giver, but then a big classic, Ernest Hemingway, the Old Man and the Sea, Lewis Carroll, Alice Adventure in Wonderland, and finally a contemporary writer from Scotland, Muriel Spark, this lovely novella, actually, it's quite short, The Prime of Miss Jane Brodie, super beautiful, about the relationship between a teacher and her students in a school in Scotland. Like, you know, remember Oh Captain, My Captain, that movie? The same version, but
That Poet Society.
That Poet Society, exactly. Yeah, quite similar, but even better in my opinion. And finally, there is the Novels Advanced course, in which we're reading the Gothic. There's slightly more to read, and all the texts are always authentic. We always use the original, but when in the intermediate course, we choose texts that are naturally a bit more simple linguistically, you know, like not so difficult grammar. it doesn't mean that they're not so, they're less good, you know, they're also awesome. It's just they're easier to read. In the advanced course, we'll be reading some more challenging texts linguistically, starting with Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, Henry James, a big classic of the Gothic, then an Australian novel by John Lindsay, Picnic at Hanging Rock. There is also a very famous movie with that title, and it's a brilliant novel. And finally, one of the great masterpieces of 20th century theater, Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett, who won the Nobel Prize in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, finally, there are also English classes if you feel that you would like to study language with Anna. And we always, you know, advise our students that they can do both at the same time. So it's a very good for language development. This is the schedule and the timetable. You can find that in our social media too. And those are the prices for anyone who wish to start in from March onwards. This is, you can pay either monthly or you can pay like just once and you have a big discount of 12%. If you want to combine more than one course, you can easily do so, and there are very big discounts if you wish to do that, up to 80% in some instances. So you can check everything out in the website or on Instagram. So to reach the end and to answer your questions, the Gothic parody or Gothic comedy, if you want to call it that way, there are many examples of it in literature, but I think it did not blossom in the same way it did in TV and cinema, you know? So obviously Scooby-Doo is the first thing that comes to mind because it's entirely based on the tropes, you know, the assumptions of the Gothic, but so many others, like Beetlejuice, for example, with combining a bit of surrealism, a bit of nonsense into the thing, or Ghostbusters, obviously, right? So Hollywood really managed to galvanize, you know, to take the Gothic parody and bring it to another level. So all these movies are giving us a bit of drama, a bit of adventure, but also a lot of humor, you know, Nightmare Before Christmas and anything by Tim Burton, Edward Scissorhands, or I don't know, there are so many as them. Obviously, The Addams Family, right? You can already start to guess what are the next slides, right? Convenção das Bruxas by Roald Dahl, right? The new movie that just came out, Orvanginha, right, from the Addams Family, that was on Netflix last year or the year before that. And one of my personal favorites, a bit maybe less known, but What We Do in the Shadows. Originally, this was a mockumentary, so a documentary that pretended to be true, right, about vampires in New Zealand. Brilliant, super funny. So yeah, thank you all guys for joining this discussion today. And if you have questions or comments, please let us know. We are here to listen. If you have to go, thank you very much for being with us. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Would you like to say anything, Anna?
Just concerning the last slide of What We Do in the Shadows, the first edition of it was a film. And it was directed and acted by Taika Waititi. Taika Waititi is the director of Jojo Rabbit, right? Possibly have heard of him before. He also is one of the most funny persons there is in cinema at the moment, right? So if you never watch What We Do in the Shadows, do, because it's very nice. And also anything by Tim Burton, right? Tim Burton is one of the most engaged movie directors talking about literature itself, right? Children's literature. He has adapted Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass. Also, The Nightmare Before Christmas is also a poem by his, right? So all of this has connections to literature, and somehow it's quite interesting as well. Yeah, so if you have any questions.
I wanted to answer to the first question here, Anna, by Chris. He asked in the chat, in fairy tale as well as in Gothic novels, some moral lesson is common at the conclusion of the story. do you believe that satire in this genre also has the function of criticizing this morality? So yeah, definitely, right? You see a clear element of didacticism, right? In many of the stories, in Gothic stories too, right? And yes, the satire and the parody of the Gothic certainly has this purpose too of making fun of morality as it is presented, right? Sometimes to present us, however, with a counter morality, right? So they're destroying something, but often they are putting, something in its place. It's not that they're just wanting to give up the didacticism at all, but they want to update it a little bit, so I would say. But this is a key issue. I agree with you, Chris. This is definitely vital and crucial for us to think about the Gothic, and especially the fairy tales, and this process of the Disneyification of fairy tales, taking out everything,
There is
or
another question.
the more gruesome parts.
Sorry to interrupt, Áureo. There is another question that is by Vanessa Fernandes. You mentioned that Virginia Woolf has some works that can be related to Gothic fiction. I'm starting Orlando now. I've read A Rune of One's Own already, so I'm really curious about her connection to the Gothic genre. She has written many ghost stories, one of which is called A Haunted House. And this is a short story of 2 pages. It's really short, but it's very nice. She uses stream of consciousness, fluxo de consciência, in order to talk about scary stuff, right? I think Angela will remember this one, right, Angela? It was one of the most interesting by her that we read in the past. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but her novels, they do not really take in that direction, like To the Lighthouse or Mrs. Dalloway. No, the novels have nothing to do with the Gothic. In those short stories, she uses a few elements to discuss it, but she's also using the modernist techniques that she highly develops in the novels, Virginia Woolf is a very talented and multifaceted writer, right? So she will try different things for different reasons and to reach different effects, right? And then another question here was that if Goethe, the German poet, and Lovecraft, a short story writer from the US, if they can be considered Gothic. So Lovecraft, most definitely, yes, although he's more interested in using aliens as a sort of, as the root of horror, so it is super. I love it. It's a more what he would call cosmic horror, so this connection between the Gothic, but it's not really only in the Middle Ages, in the cathedrals and stuff that you would find it. It's not so much, he's not so afraid of demons and I don't know, alchemists. He's more afraid of aliens, basically. So there are stories in which he explores the Middle Ages, but in magic. But mostly he's focusing on this combination with sci-fi. The Call of Cthulhu, for example, or At the Mountains of Madness, which is about the exploration of Antarctica, and they discover an alien civilization. Very nice too. So Lovecraft, most definitely. Goethe, not really.
Not
Goethe
so
is at
much,
the
yeah.
base of Romanticism. There are many elements that Goethe explores that will feed into the Gothic, So it's more the reverse. Anne Radcliffe would be looking for Goethe and not the contrary, So it's more that Goethe influenced the Gothic rather than the other way around. But it's a very good question.
Yeah, but she's talking is particularly possibly about the Faustic myth.
Faustic myth, yeah.
Yes, of doing the pact with the devil, which is something that we will see appearing, for instance, in, of course, perceived in other terms and altered a little bit, but in the picture of Dorian Gray as well, right? So Oscar Wilde himself, he takes the Faustic myth and he transforms it into something else. Yes.
Yeah.
Any more questions, people? I think that we have answered them all, right? Just taking a quick look at here. Thank you very much for coming and the compliments. We always love the compliments. Thank you.
That's great then, guys. Thank you so much. Have a lovely Saturday and weekend, and see you all, okay? Bye-bye.
Thank you, people. Have a
Cheers,
lovely
all the best.
weekend. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Enjoy your weekend. Bye, Cris.